With regard to thought forms, I've been interested for a good while in what happens, for example, if I go to the movies and see something that I really don't want to have manifested on our planet. And I've gotten to the point where I don't go anymore to horror films or terribly frightening things, murders and so forth, because I suspect that as I sit there open and take this in and concentrate on it, I create more energy going to thought forms that are then available for persons who are living from conditions to access.
Well stated.
And I'm concerned about things you said with regard to, that's not my responsibility. My responsibility is the fun I'm having, if I could have fun, and I don't, watching that kind of thing. And I have no responsibility for my thoughts affecting other people. Is that true?
You have no responsibility for the way the other people approach their valve. But anything that you give your attention to falls into the category of offering vibrational energy to it, which means there is greater potential for influence of others. In other words, as you give your attention to something, by giving your attention to it, it becomes more. And so what happens is you assist you and others who are part of your mass consciousness literally create vibrational cultures, in other words, conditions under which those vibrational patterns can more easily be achieved.
All right, then I'm correct in my intuitive feeling that I would be better off enjoying, as I already do, the more beautiful things, the more uplifting things, that which I want to manifest.
Certainly. Now you see, you can tell by the way you feel. Think about that. What is the feeling of negative emotion when you say, I can tell intuitively that this is inappropriate for me? What is the feeling of negative emotion? It is the withdrawal of your inner being. In other words, what it literally means is, I've gone to this movie and I'm projecting my thought here, but my inner being is not who I really am, is not joining me in this thought. Now, does that mean that every person who may be sitting in the theater next to you should be having the same feeling? Doesn't mean that. Because as you've heard us say today, you can talk about money with a closed valve or money with an open valve. In other words, one night we were talking with a young man who was talking about having gone to see Rambo, or one of the movies that was popular at that time that was touted as being extremely violent. And he said that he liked to go, and that he felt uncomfortable that others thought that he should not, that he was contributing to violence. And we said, well, you could see something like that, and as you're watching it, you could see destruction, you could see people wielding havoc, you could see people you could see things that are of a valve-closing nature, or you could see someone very clear about intent, who had flowed a lot of energy toward it, who had a lot of resources flowing through him, who was tuned in, tapped in, turned on, who was making the best decisions at the best time, who was feeling the empowerment of who he is. You see what we're getting at? In other words, most people who are feeling anger or fear or disconnection in such a situation are feeling their vulnerable self. In other words, they're feeling that vulnerable part of them that they remember that doesn't have control of their experience, that is being mutilated or robbed or plundered in some way by someone who has the aggressive ability to jump into their experience. While someone who is watching the film and feeling good about it is knowing that all is well, is seeing themselves more as the one who is in control rather than the one that is being mistreated. You see what we're getting at?
Yes, and another portion of that, years ago, Patrick used to want to go, and he still does, he goes to these horror movies, and yet he was afraid to sleep without a light and a number of other things. You know, he was afraid, and I said, why in the world would you go and wallow in this kind of negativity when it's a problem. And he gave me the most wonderful answer. He said, by seeing these things and knowing that this is not real, it gives me an opportunity to control the fear that I have not been able to control on another level. And it actually has helped me.
Good.
So that's a different angle of the same thing. And that brings up the question that many people have with regard to video games for kids. Is it harming them to work with something that from an adult standpoint looks like such negativity? And yet it hasn't proved that way for us at all. My son's very interested in this. It's been very positive for him. And yet little children who are quite open are doing this. Does it affect them in a negative way?
Let's rephrase your question. Does finding an object of attention that pleases and delights and opens your valve have negative effect upon you?
Wonderful. You're right. No.
It's interesting, as we watch parents who worry about their children, it is their worry that has the greatest negative effect upon the children. It's not usually the things the children are choosing. It's also interesting, as we watch your culture, we see you from a very early age with your children, comparing them to each other. And we see many of you, there is, especially in your nation, there is a tremendous encouragement toward participating in sports, either as spectators or as participants. But all of this is very combative and violent in nature. And then there is the encouraging them to join the army and a recognition that if they do not, that they are somehow cowardly. And as we watch your nation, we see you as a tremendously violent people, but we do not feel it from the children. And you see, what's happening is the parents who have been vibrating this are now looking at their children and saying, look what you have become. And we say, is it any wonder? In other words, they are a further magnification of the vulnerability that parents have been vibrating all along. But we assure you, it is not the video games that are producing that in them. It is the video game, if anything, is giving them an opportunity to focus in a way that opens their valve. In most cases, there are exceptions to that, of course.
In our case, it's been particularly wonderful because it's given him an eye-hand coordination that's just fantastic. It's an opportunity. He calls it a trampoline for his brain.
Yes.
Because it's a problem-solving opportunity.
Yeah. And most of all, it is teaching anyone who participates the power of focus. Mm-hmm. In other words, you can literally feel yourself. That's why he calls it a trampoline for his brain, because he can feel those muscles getting stronger and stronger and stronger. Most of you do not have much ability to stay focused upon anything very long because you're bombarded with so much data. Mm-hmm.